Welcome, and thank you very much for showing up for this presentation. I really appreciate the crowd that's here. So, to start out with, I know that people are focused on questions for the question period as well as lunch. So I'm going to offer a personal challenge here. I have a $5 Canadian bill, nice and blue, and I have a US $5 bill. So whoever asks me the first question in the question session will get either one of them, your choice. Can't have both, and Dick's excluded. And it can't be a lame question like what mountain I'm on. So I'm going to talk today about the value of process automation and the performance and provide some other ideas of how to focus your attention on getting those adequate returns from your automation investment. Let's first consider the term adequate. When Dick and John came to me with, can you provide something in the form for this presentation, I was thinking adequate. What does that mean? It's pretty subjective. And I'm going to step out on a limb. I'm going to say that process automation is both necessary and it's valuable. Our processes are much more complex than they were 50 years ago, and our industry is much more competitive than 50 years ago. So show of hands, who here does not have process automation in their facility? Right, so no one doesn't. That's great. So if we believe that process automation is useful, then it's because we control our processes more efficiently, better, and we execute our business more effectively. So again, show of hands. Who can run their process without process automation? It's pretty clear then that we have, by default, a tremendous ROI from our process automation. If we can't run our process without it, it's really valuable. If we look at the chart in the bottom here, it's pretty easy to see if we wanted to maximize profit, which curve, which profile is most beneficial to us. Right? I'm seeing some nods in the head in the audience, but I think we have to also recognize that to get those benefits by moving to the right on that curve, we have to put in resources. So it costs us money to put in process automation. It costs us money to maintain. And although I don't drink beer, I'm going to put forward an analogy here for those three curves, that each one of them actually might be very valuable. So if I was just brewing beer in my home for my own personal consumption, I'm not worried about profit, and I might be able to give up on some losses. So if I'm on the left-hand side of the curve, that might be completely adequate for me. I just want to make sure that I have beer for next week. I don't drink beer, but if I have a microbrewery, I might be somewhere in the middle, and I'll be implementing some PLC control, PID control. Still worried about quality, and I'm still worried about my production and my profit, but I'm not an Anheuser-Busch. So Anheuser-Busch produces 70 trillion liters of beer a year. That's huge. And that's only 30% of the production in the world, but you better believe that they are completely focused on getting to the right-hand side in that curve. Maximize their throughput, make sure the quality is consistent, and make sure it's of value to their customers. So I think a better question here is, what curve is best for your business, not most profitable? Because that could be different for each of our businesses. We have so many choices where we can implement automation and derive value from that. We could put PID controllers in place, PLC logic. We could put advanced process control in place, maybe some graphics, some advanced graphics, or we could do some data historians or alarm historians. Tremendous number of choices, but how do we know where to focus our resources to maintain and improve our business? So I think understanding the performance as to what is adequate requires us to talk about the performance in actionable terms and have some strategies to improve that automation. I've listed here 3 different areas to help focus on that process of discussion and action. We could use key performance indicators. So what are our assets doing currently? If something is broken, how do we fix it? How do we focus resources there? So that's one strategy. Second strategy, we could wait until our system is antiquated and we have to replace it, or be forced to replace it, like Helen was saying with their facility in Japan. But during those migrations, we do need to ensure that we look at the opportunity in that migration to improve that implementation. We could also look at staffing strategies to make sure that we're not focused just on maintaining, but also doing that continuous improvement and improving the process. So if you had a dollar in your pocket, what would you do with it? And if you had 5 in your pocket, what would you do with it? Anyone thirsty? You guys don't drink beer? I don't understand. So I'll talk about the first idea around KPIs. At Nova Chemicals, we started on a journey several years ago to report and to track and report on the APC utilization Nova-wide. And we were courageous enough to expose these stats throughout the organization. So not just at the leadership level and not just at the technical level, because if you don't do it in only one of those 2 levels, you're going to silo the information and silo the discussions. So we broadcasted it across the organization so people could talk and discuss, well, here's an asset that's underperforming. What are we going to do about it? Because it's the technical folks that are going to be making that change. So we chose 90% as the target. We said if our assets are performing below that, then we want to focus some attention. And with this reporting, we can drill down to find the specific asset that's underperforming. And when I talk about asset, I'm not talking about a facility in general as an aggregate score. I'm talking about the individual advanced process control application. There might be 20 of them in a plant. Then we took that one step further and we said, well, I don't really care necessarily whether an application's on or off, but what's the value that that application is deriving for me? And not only what is the value, but if that application was supposed to be on and expected to be on and it wasn't on, then what is the missed opportunity? So if you combine the is it on or off, and what is the value that it's generating with the what is the missed opportunity, then that gives you something to discuss. Gives you something to talk about in some measurable data. So that combination is pretty critical. We did the same thing for our PID controllers. So are they being utilized? What's the value they're generating? And if they aren't being utilized, what's the value that we're missing? So another example, in this case we chose 80% as an adequate number. So that choice of what that adequate number is really critical to have that discussion. If you don't choose a line in the sand, you can't have that discussion. For oscillating controllers, that can have a negative impact on your production, whether it's the console operator trying to manage a process upset. Maybe it actually caused a process upset. It also has some consequences in terms of maintenance. So maybe you're rebuilding valves more frequently. Maybe you're cleaning fouled exchangers more frequently. In this case, we chose 6% as what is adequate. And then if we have more than 6% of the controllers in that asset that are oscillating, then we have a discussion about how we're going to reduce that back to what our target was, the 6%. So the last 4 slides, I think it's pretty easy to come up with some quantifiable number as far as the dollar benefits. When we talk about alarm management, that's a lot more difficult. Yet we still have KPIs and targets that we shoot for. For Nova Chemicals, we look at the number of standing alarms on the alarm summary, the number of unauthorized suppressed alarms, the number of overdue alarm documentation revalidations. We have a 5-year cycle on that. So if they're pushing into 6 years on the revalidation, there's something broken in our process. The percent time in predictive mode is an interesting one. If you've followed the AMUA documentation, since 1999, they had come out and coined this term called predictive mode. And that really talks about what are your alarm rates. So if you're getting less than one alarm every 10 minutes, you're in a predictive state. And they have a couple other categories as well. So what we did is we took all that data and we compressed it into a stat. So what is the percent of time that you're in predictive mode? Now you have something that you can trend over time. And that we felt was much more useful. Having all these KPIs reported in a visual fashion, that allows us to see our performance, compare our performance to targets, and encourage healthy competition within the different facilities. And then have those discussions as to, okay, maybe I'm underperforming compared to my other plant that looks very similar to mine. What are we going to do about that, guys? That's what the KPI performance is all about. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the technology problem. We have consoles, DCS equipment, controllers, they're all getting older. And so occasionally you have to replace them. This is a critical time for you to make a choice as to what you want to do with the next generation of technology that you put in place. At Nova Chemicals, we added a new ethylene and polyethylene facility and expanded our utilities in the Joffre, Alberta petrochemical facility back in 2000. That was a big change for us and a big opportunity. At the time, it was the largest ethylene plant in the world. There's been some leapfrogging since, but this was a great opportunity for us to stick our necks out, and we designed an operator interface that was based on abnormal situation management and on human factors. It was something different that we had never done within the company before. Some of these features that you see is key in the advanced user interface you would not have seen in the process industry probably earlier than 2000. I would say we were one of the leading folks kind of pushing that. Bridget would probably be able to say the same thing. So in this environment, when the operator selects a target, they will have a trend show up for them. So that increases their situation awareness. They don't ask for the trend, it automatically gets presented to them. Not only when they select the target, they get the faceplate and the trend associated with that variable, anticipating that they're going to do something with that variable. Up to 4 graphics will change at the same time. So again, we're anticipating the next step that the operator is thinking about. They're thinking about, has that process variable changed? Is it slowly rising? Has it been a spike? Has that been a repeated behavior over time? So those are the things that we're trying to encourage. We have color-coded navigation tabs so that the operator can select a graphic based on whether there's an alarm in there. I'm not going to talk a little bit very much about the grayscale or the lines. That's just clutter. The grayscale graphics is a dark gray or almost white. That I think is immaterial, and I don't think that we actually generate a lot of value in actually that grayscale concept. I think it's actually the more advanced features around the trending to improve the situation awareness that is the huge benefit here. A caution I would have is following the crowd and implementing stuff off the shelf is valuable, it's low cost, but you might be missing something. And let me be clear, I'm not advocating putting in custom solutions, but I am advocating look at the custom solution and what you can do with your process automation system versus what is available to you off the shelf. Understand that difference and understand what possible benefit that you are giving up by not following that custom solution. If I wasn't to say that these 3 graphics came from the same petrochemical facility, you might not have guessed it. In this case, I think what is key here is those 3 different graphic solutions were put in place by different teams at different times, influenced by different operators, and they all had different starting points. And I think the key for me on this one is best practice is very subjective. Each of these teams felt that they had the best practice. But you see over time, things had changed. Whether that's because of people or whether we were learning more, I'm not sure. But it's not uncommon to find that in any company, that we're presenting operators with the same information, but in different format. This is what we put in place in 2000. It started out with our plants at Joffre. And we stuck our necks out. This was not something that was presented in industry as far as an operator interface prior to this. Developed on abnormal situation management kind of concepts with human factors. We have in front of you here 4 different graphics. Left, right, lower left, lower right. You can see trends integrated in there. Every time the operator selects a target, all those graphics change as well as the trend. So if they're looking at something that has just a process variable, they'll get a trend with the process variable. If they have something that's associated with a controller, they see the PV, the set point, the output, and the mode. So they see all that information to help them. One of those key functions that the console operator has in front of them is to monitor the system. And this environment is anticipatory in that when they select something, we're setting them up to actually answer the questions that they already have in their head. What has been going on with that process variable that it came into alarm? If I'm doing monitoring over the day, what is going on with this particular variable that maybe I'm checking up on every few hours? So that's what the trending that offers us. The third area, I think, is pretty key, and I only have one slide on this, but it's around staffing. So if you have bare bones staff, you don't really have a lot of time to I'll call it blue sky. Most of your time is focused on maintaining status quo. You've got some asset in there that you're accountable to maintain, and you're going to maintain it. But you aren't going to spend time on this new and great idea that's going to make a step change in your performance. You oftentimes will need to bring in an external resource if you want to refurbish a control or make that step change in performance. So if your resources can focus time on actively understanding what the risks are to the business and that plant, and coming up with improvements, and then advertising those initiatives to leadership or their peers, then you'll get support for that continuous improvement. If you don't have that time to look for those opportunities and understand the risk, you're just going to do what you've done forever. You're just going to maintain everything until you have to replace it. I would suggest there's an alternative model. You could wait for your competitor to make a step change in profitability and then be a fast follower. But you're going to have to reinvent what they created that you see of as value. Or you might have to wait or convince your supplier that, hey, what these guys have put in place, I want that. Right? That's oftentimes a hard thing to do. You might require some external resources in terms of a consultant to come in and replicate that functionality. And that can be costly as well. We're seeing that in industry. We have some people that are copying what we had done at Joffre here in 2000. And here we are 17 years later. We need to consider both the current value as well as a future opportunity to define what's adequate for my facility. I've talked about 3 different ways that you can focus some discussions and have some conversations around that performance. Look at KPIs, still do the maintenance via break fix. Look at the upgrading the technology, and when you make that upgrade, don't just copy what you had to create something that looks exactly the same, but just a different engine underneath it. Look at what is the incremental value that you can get from replacing that technology, because that technology is providing you lots more capabilities. And making sure that your staffing strategy has some capabilities, some free time to actually do that blue sky thinking. For me, the key is get this in front of people so that they can discuss. And that doesn't mean just leadership, it doesn't mean just technical, it's everyone in the organization. Get the data in front of them, have that thoughtful discussion about how you're going to improve and get to that target of your whatever you think is adequate. Whatever that target is, you need to have the discussion of how to maintain or improve. So I'll leave you again with, if you had $1 in your pocket or $5 in your pocket, US has, there's actually some purple on here. What are you going to do with that money that you have available? Thank you very much. And thank you, Dick and John, for inviting me to present.